How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you. Just
Good, man.
I've been a little all over the place. It's like coming down here in Colorado, or it did come down here in Colorado like yesterday, all yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
So um, we had to get over to my cousin, my girlfriend's cousin's house to take care of their dog because they went to
Oh, man.
Jamaica and they wound up
Oh,
leaving like 12 hours early. So since then, it's like I just no routine over here. you know, it's like the dogs take precedence.
right.
But so how was Europe? You just got back,
Good, man.
right?
Yeah, I just got back a couple of days ago. It was fun. Yeah, I went to see the family for about a week, and then spent a lot of time with that team that I consult with. So that was really cool. We had a couple of home games, and then a full week of practice. And so it was pretty fun to dive in, run a couple of team sessions, do a bunch of individual stuff with players and coaches and whatnot.
So when you did team
Yeah.
sessions, what did you guys focus on?
We did one where we did kind of a review and core values that we had implemented earlier in the season. And since then, we actually, had we brought in a couple of new players, so it was good to just kind of introduce those guys to it, and just do a refresher basically, and just make sure we're holding each other accountable, and guys remember what the core values are and how we're looking to go about measuring those, and kind of bring them to life,
hmm
if you will. And then the second one was kind of an optional session just on just fundamental mental skills training and the stuff I teach to my individual clients. And I had a few players show up for that, just going over pre-game visualization, meditation, what else do we talk about? Just in-game focus cues, developing personalized core values and on-court, key behaviors so you can tap into. Yeah.
Dang. So how long does that session last? That second one?
The second one was, it took about 45 minutes, I want to say.
Really?
Obviously I could have gone for like hours.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a lot of stuff to cover because
Right.
normally, I mean, visualization. All you had like four different topics, and
Yeah.
normally
Yeah.
those four different topics are like 4 different hours. So
Yeah, exactly. The way I wanted to do it is to just give them a quick intro to like what I typically do and how it works, and then I actually had several of the guys follow up individually to dive in a little bit more depth and detail, and that's what we'll probably do on FaceTime calls here in the next couple of weeks or so.
okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
So when you're going over core values as a team, what's the importance of core values to you?
Well, the importance of core values is to just make sure the team has an identity, right, and something that they consistently can point to make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable, and it doesn't just become about an outcome focus, but rather there's a process and a clear identity that kind of serves as a separator
hmm
for the team and for the organization.
Have you read Amy Cuddy's book, Presence?
I have not actually.
She
So
because
she,
she
she
talks about
she's
it
the
in there.
power posing one, right?
hmm
Yeah, I've watched a bunch of her stuff.
Yeah, I just reread it like a week and a half ago now,
Uh-huh.
and she talks about core values in there a lot and how when you have a core value and when you don't have a core value. So when you do have a
Mhm.
core value, you're way more likely to actually stick through with something when adversity hits or when those hardships come about. And I think it's because you have, like, going back to that team identity and like how important it is, it's because you have that identity of being that certain way, you
Right.
know and so then it's like, oh no, I'm like, one of my values is grit. So it's like when
Mhm.
hard stuff happens, like I'm like, no, I'm a gritty person, like I can make it through this, you know
Right.
so you kind of attach to that identity. And so that's cool that, like, you said that, and then I just read that a week and a half ago.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I
um,
always feel like there's like sort of an emotional piece to it, and then there's like concrete sort of action steps, and and measurables that we try to attach to, at least to a degree,
Like
so
behaviors.
yeah, behavior. So if toughness is one of our core values. So a measurable team goal that kind of feeds into that is trying to take at least 3 charges per game, as an example.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's when I coached baseball. One of our values was toughness as well, and we had hit by pitches is what we measured. And I told them that for every pitch they get hit with, I'll put $5 in a jar. And so by the end of the summer, we had, and I told them there was a 50 hit by pitch minimum. So like I wouldn't give them basically less. It would be $250 or nothing. And so it's literally the bottom of the 9th inning, and we're down 2-1 with 2 outs. And the kid at the plate is not even trying to get a hit or anything. All he's trying to do is get hit by the pitch so that they could get 50 hit by pitches. And of course he gets hit with it, and my dugout goes absolutely nuts. And then everybody thinks, oh, they just got the tying run on board, right? Like winning runs at the plate, who actually was one of our power hitters. He was our, I think, 4-hitter at the time. And no, it was because they just got the 50th hit by pitch, and they just got $250 in the last game of the season to go do what they wanted to. And then the next kid actually wound up like hitting an absolute missile to deep left center, and it got caught on the warning track, so we wound up losing. But it felt like a win. It was one of those where it felt like a win. Right. Anyways, so yeah, but that's cool that like you find. What other behaviors do you guys try to measure?
So we look at some off-court stuff too. So like creating a family type of atmosphere. Making it a goal to have one team outing a month, as an example. Like those type of things. So it's some stuff that's more so on the court. Communication would be another one that we pay a lot of attention to. Huddling up every free throw, as an example, right? And then just the accountability piece, making sure that guys open their mouth and hold other guys accountable to our standard of excellence. Just to give you a few different ideas. So the culture, obviously, I mean, it's about on court as well as off court togetherness.
Yeah, that's good. Those are like all big strategies, and that's one of my that's the reason for this whole podcast, really, is to give people legit concrete strategies that they can use in their team and in their life. And so like that right there is huge, being able to give them the strategy of huddling up on the court, because a lot of people think that, oh well, they're supposed to be doing that anyways. But if you aren't paying attention to it and you aren't measuring it, then how often is it actually happening? And if you just feel like it happens a lot, or maybe you're just like, well, I don't really know. And then if you don't know, you're not doing it intentionally, you're not doing it consciously, and you're not growing it towards what you want to become. And so having those behaviors and then marking them is huge. And coming up with those behaviors is sometimes the hardest part. Like being able to say, okay, this is what it actually looks like. Like, this is what I have to see in order for me to know that, like, you are in control of yourself. Like one of the behaviors on the basketball team that I work with is like, I have to be able to see you take a deep breath when you take a free throw. So as a coach, that's how I know that you're in control of yourself. Same thing with baseball. Like before you get in the box, I need to see you take a deep breath and then get going, so that I know for a fact like you're in control of yourself, and like that's one thing you can measure.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of having sort of a peer like an accountability partner, if you will. Whether it's a mental coach, a position coach or something, or a teammate. Somebody that can look at your physical behaviors and help you track stuff, have concrete things to look at, to then essentially be able to give you feedback on your core values, for instance. I
So
think it's a
how
big
do you
deal.
set up those accountability partners?
I mean, I do it with my individual clients where I'm essentially the accountability partner, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I watch that game film and then give the athlete a rating on the scale of 1 through 5 on their core values, and potentially track certain personalized key behaviors that feed into those core values. So, something like number of times per game that the player claps or gives positive touches to teammates, versus how many times per game does he or she, hang their head, complain to the refs, etc. So we have sort of a subjective rating across the core values that's informed by more objective measures that are behavioral in nature, and then just provide some feedback to justify the rating, and offer some strategies and recommendations for adjustments for the next game, and the player will do the same thing, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
we compare and contrast our feedback. And at times we've also done it to where we've brought in a third party, so brought in the coach. So then the feedback gets triangulated and everybody comes at it from a slightly different angle. And I think that's pretty powerful as well.
Yeah, definitely. How do you set it up though? Like, say if you're not there, and they need to do it with their own accountability partner, and then because you don't want to be like, say you don't have the time necessarily because
Mm.
you are only one person and you're working with all these different teams, and how do you set it up within a team so that for a fact that like they're actually doing the right thing,
Mm.
or do you have to check in with those accountability partners every once in a while as well?
Yeah, I mean, essentially the idea would be to, partner up teammates and have them share their individualized, personalized core values, unless you do it, on team core values, so they pretty much stay the same for everybody. And then provide ratings. You obviously have to be mindful of like who plays, who doesn't play, or guys in at the same time, or is it maybe smarter to, if it's a youth team, for instance, to pick a parent or somebody that's going to be sitting in the stands, right? And then, yeah, of course, I would ideally want access to, to that interchange, and see, what kind of feedback the accountability partner is providing and how the athletes sees themselves.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting because that's one thing that I've always done as well, is create accountability partners within the team.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, as when you're coaching yourself, you can be their accountability partner, but when you're working with a team of 40 per se, then it's a little bit harder to be the accountability partner for all of them, whereas it's
Right.
a little bit easier to be the accountability partner for maybe like groups within the team, or um, or just maybe like two people at a time, talking to them, two or three people at a time anyways. So
Right.
um, I kind of like have you ever heard the concept of boat crews?
I have not actually, no.
That's one thing that I've used with a couple of different schools, and that's gone over really well for like bigger teams, splitting them into boat crews. And in a boat crew, there's like 5 or 6 people, just like in the Navy SEALs. Like there's 5 or 6 of them, and then you have a boat crew captain who's in charge of, like, that's the one. It's kind of like captains or a leadership council, but
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, these people, it's a very volatile environment. Like if they mess up, like you can fire them and then promote somebody else within the boat crew up to the top. And that's been a little bit easier to deal with in terms of like getting information out to the guys. And then when we do meet in a team atmosphere, it's like you ask the leaders or the boat crew captains to kind of facilitate the discussion.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. That's cool. Yeah,
So that's like another way that I've done that.
yeah, yeah. I like that a lot. I think, one thing that I'm seeing is, because I do a lot of work with professional teams. So when it comes to peer feedback, it's obviously like super important to look at how you're going to match people up as well. Like who's going to be receptive to whose feedback, and like, do you do it by position? Do you do it by age and experience? Do you partner up older guys with younger guys? I mean, there are a lot of dynamics that kind of go into that to where you have to make sure that guys are open to the feedback in the first place, and that there is a process of accountability. I've been in the past, what I've done is I've utilized injured players to provide peer feedback. That's been pretty powerful as well, because not only does it help the guys that are on the court, but it really helps the injured players just stay mentally engaged and feel as though they're contributing in some kind of way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's huge. Having the injured guys, I never really thought about that one, but I could see that definitely. I mean, because I was injured in baseball, and I remember that's one thing that I can really like connect with somebody on, because I know what it's like to feel completely out of the team when you do get hurt, especially at the pro level. I don't know what that's like, but I do know that when you get hurt at the pro level, especially over in Europe, there's a pretty good chance that like you could just get sent home, like if you get hurt. So that's huge, being able to still feel like you're a part of the team and still be a part of the team. By finding different jobs like that.
Yeah.
So in terms of like you were talking about visualization and then pregame visualization, and then do you do postgame visualization as well?
I don't do post game. For post game, I do more so the core value self assessment. Of course, guys can do that in combination with the visualization, just kind of going over how the game went, or just watching back the game film, which I always recommend as well. Some guys like doing it, others don't. But certainly pregame is where I'm biggest on it, I'd say. And that's where I have guys kind of do it in 3 different segments. And I kind of thought of this little like 10-minute time block, which 10 minutes seems like a manageable number even for guys that don't particularly like visualization, or maybe they like it, but they're not super patient with it, right? But 10 minutes seems manageable. You can condense it if need be, but you start out by taking 3 minutes, just going over your personal highlight film. So just visualizing and recalling your best moments in recent practices and games, and kind of giving yourself boost confidence in that way, I suppose. And then from there, I have my guys go into what I call response to adversity, right? Where you think about any type of adversity that might realistically happen in the game. Things that sometimes might get you off your game, turnovers, a couple missed shots, coach pulls you from the game because of foul trouble or something, whatever it may be, and you see yourself responding to it in a positive manner. So essentially, the second segment of that visualization is your plan B. If your plan A of going out there and just having a great game doesn't work out, and then I have my clients wrap it up with 3 minutes of game specific visualization, just going over the game plan, specific assignments, specific plays that are relevant for the game coming up, and then finish that off with just a minute of deep breathing, get yourself centered, sort of a quick mini meditation, to kind of do all that within that 10-minute time block.
Mm-hmm. And do you make the audios for them, or is this
I
something
do not actually. That's something I haven't.
Okay, so when you're doing this, do you just have them like set? So like, say you were to have me do this 10-minute meditation or 10-minute visualization process, how would you explain to me to go through it? Now that I know like which each section actually entails, now how do I actually do it?
Right. I mean, pretty simple. Usually I'll encourage them to just find a quiet spot, say within 90 minutes or so prior to tip off. Some guys like doing it the night before, which is fine, or early in the day on game day. So just find a quiet spot, close your eyes. Sometimes I just have them experiment with different perspectives, seeing it through their own eyes, visualizing themselves from, like externally, I suppose, just to see, what resonates most, because looking at the research, different perspectives resonate with different people. There really isn't like the one magical right way to do it necessarily. And then, you know, obviously encouraging guys to bring in their different senses as well. So it's not just a visualization, but it's actual imagery that, you know, incorporates, you know, like sounds and smells and whatever the case may be. I know for me, playing high school basketball, that smell of popcorn pregame, you know, for some reason that did something for me. Like, it got me excited, right?
Yeah.
So just talking about those aspects and how you can incorporate those into that visualization potentially. But, you know, what I found is that most guys, they visualize anyways, whether it's intentional or not, but most will, you know, at a minimum sort of daydream about a game and how they want to play and stuff. So they really know how to do it. So this is just putting a, you know, somewhat of a structure to it to just to see what resonates.
Mm-hmm. And
you know?
So do they have like a stopwatch or something like that, and they just like hit start, and then they visualize themselves for 3 minutes going over that highlight film? Or how do they structure those 3 minutes within it? How do they know, like, okay, I only want to do 10 minutes here? Because I feel like sometimes I could roll through a whole highlight tape of myself playing my best in like 10 seconds, you know?
Right.
So like going through it in 3 minutes could sometimes feel like an eternity if they're just sitting there watching themselves shoot the same shot over and over and over again. So, but like, yeah, that's I guess what's one of my questions. Like, do they sit there with a stopwatch normally, or how do you have them do it for like 3 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, you know, what I do is I tell them, look, just experiment with it, see how that 10-minute time frame feels, if it's comfortable, you know, and I'll encourage them to time themselves literally on their phone, right, and try it out. But at the same time, I want to make sure that they understand that the 10 minutes is not a magical number. It's just a nice way to break it down to segments. But if they want to do it for 5 minutes total or for 15 minutes, that's perfectly fine with me. You know, I think the 10 minutes just sort of helps them get a feel for it. And then from there, I just, you know, I'll typically just see what resonates with the individual athletes. And it could honestly vary somewhat by the day as well. It's like when I meditate in the mornings, I have days where I do it maybe for like 5-6 minutes, and I feel pretty good. And other days I feel like I got to work through some stuff, and I sit there for 25 minutes. So yeah, I think having some flexibility built in is important. And again, the 10 minutes is just it's just a nice way to initially lay it out for the athlete before they then kind of figure out how to make it their own and potentially modify it.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, that was what I was kind of wondering about the stopwatch thing, because that makes, I mean, I agree with you. That makes complete sense. Like some days I'm the same way. Some days I'll wake up and I'll do like 5 minutes of meditation. I'll feel great. And then some days I'll need to do like 20. And it's the same way. Do you teach your guys meditation as well?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, that's a big part of what I teach, just sort of as a foundational skill. You know, meditation sort of as a gateway to just mindfulness, you know, throughout each and every day, and then carrying that into your performance. So I'm definitely big on meditation for sure.
What are some other foundational skills that you teach them?
I think, you know, really meditation is like the one big life skill that I typically go with. You know, sometimes I teach progressive muscle relaxation. If, you know, doing something that's a bit more physical than meditation is what resonates with the athletes. Then of course you know, the pregame visualization like we talked about. I really like helping athletes develop in-game focus cues. I think that's a huge skill, having ways to remind yourself in game to yourself to kind of stick with the game plan, stick with your identity, especially when things go south. You know, I find that a lot of athletes they get off track mentally, right? Like everybody goes in wanting to do all the right things, and then something happens, and all of a sudden the game is over, and you realize that once adversity hit, you never stuck with your initial plans. So having focus cues, you know, whether it's you know, visual ones, some kind of a cue statement, image that you put on your wrist, with a Sharpie or write on your sneakers or something, or maybe it's a physical gesture, like pounding your chest to energize yourself. It could be a focus cue you say to yourself. So kind of tapping into your self-talk and cueing yourself in that way. It could be a combination of those things. And then also working with external cues as well. So with the core values, I've started having my athletes color code those. So say aggressiveness is competitiveness is one of your core values. You might attach the color red to it. So then I encourage my athletes to look for red objects that they might see on the court, or red markings on the floor. So every time you look at it, you use it as a way to check in with yourself on your competitiveness and whether or not you're maxing out that core value.
I like that a lot.
Thanks.
That could be. I might steal that and
Go
use
ahead,
that.
man.
I'm thinking about my basketball team right now, who are the core values that we established are believe, excellence, aggressiveness, selfless, and toughness. And so I think that would be really cool if they came in, because we've also broken down the head coach's kind of talks at timeouts and what he's talking about pregame, postgame, and it all comes back to what I call the DOC, defense, offense, culture. So what's he bringing up about the defense? What is he bringing up about the offense? And then what is he bringing up about the culture? So every timeout that he has, like, they've also broken down their defense into just like the 3 things they need to do to succeed. Same thing with their offense. So like normally when I go into a basketball team, it's like, okay, what are you guys like really good at? Like, tell me about your defense, tell me about your offense. And I get them up on this huge whiteboard, and there's just a shit ton of words like written up on the board. And I'm like, okay, so there's no real consensus around what the offense is or what the defense actually is. What are like the main principles? So we broke that down, and then same thing with culture. We came up with the 5 core principles of the team. So each timeout he has, he picks one of the things that he's going to talk about with the defense, one of the things with offense, and then one of the culture values. So now I'm thinking when he talks about the culture, that'd be really cool if he had those 5 different colors that he could go back to and just kind of like lay them out on the floor even, or like have a piece of paper that he's writing on that's red or green or yellow or blue or whatever it might be, to kind of remind them of like, just trigger that mindset instantly.
Yeah, I love that, actually. That's really cool. I always thought too, I've never done this before, but I've thought about it. It's, I suppose it's rather uncommon in basketball, but if on the sideline you could use, cue cards, right? As a coach. So when, say, your team is lacking that competitiveness and the color is red, just hold up like a red sign or card of some kind, where like the audience, like no one's going to be able to make sense of it, but the players know, all right, like it's time to step it up in that area. So I just really am big on how do we go about cueing certain things, and coaches, I think, oftentimes have a tendency to make things too complicated, and timeouts is just like so much information that, athletes struggle processing everything. So the simpler we can make it, the better. And then also the more we can remind athletes in ways that resonate with different types of learning styles. I think that's big as well. So instead of just the verbal explanations and timeouts, for instance, the more you can bring in visual cues, the more you can bring in, maybe some sort of tactile cues. Right. I think that's a really big deal to some athletes.
Wait, so what's a tactile cue that you might have used in the past or you're thinking about right now when you brought that up?
So, and a good example would be like I had a player a couple of years ago that had a tendency to hang his head when he'd get down on himself, and he was super hard on himself. So he came up with the idea of just like tapping his chin. So every time he tapped his chin, it just served as a reminder to correct his posture and body language. And you combine that with a visual cue of just, I think he just wrote on his sneaker, like, eyes up, right? So hang your head. All right, you look at your sneaker, eyes up. Oh, okay. And then maybe combine it with this. It's just different ways, again, of cueing yourself. And, most athletes already do it in some kind of way anyway. So the more you can be intentional about it, the better, like think of how many athletes you've worked with that'll like hit their chest when they're looking to like step up their aggressiveness or play with more pride or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had this
that sort of
like
thing.
going off of that. I actually had this pitcher last year that pitched for University of Notre Dame, and we were talking about like what he does when I say the same thing. When adversity hits, we all do something, right? It's becoming intentional. It's about becoming conscious with it so we can use it intentionally. And this one athlete, he was telling me like, oh, this is what he does when he throws a ball, or the ump calls a bad pitch, or the ump calls a ball on a pitch that was clearly a strike, And so I'm sitting there in the first game that he goes into pitch, and I'm filming him, and I'm like, wait, he's not doing what we talked about. He's doing something completely different. He was hitting his glove on his hip. Every time he would throw a bad pitch, he would hit his glove on his hip. And then he would get the ball back and then, throw a good pitch. And so I brought that up to him after the game, and I was like, do you know that you hit yourself like this every time? And he's like, really? I do. And we watched the tape, and of course he did. And he's like, wow, I had no idea that I did that. And then, so then from then on, we used it intentionally. And he's like, okay, like now I know what I'm doing, and I can use it to help flip my brain into that next play mentality. And
I love it.
so it's like that same thing. And I always say this, I'm like, we all do something already. It's just like we might not be aware of it. Even
right.
And I always tell this story about Jason Mott, who was the 2012 closer for the St. Louis Cardinals when they won the World Series. And I was talking to him, and I was telling him about how we all have these releases, and it usually involves a physical action, a deep breath, and a verbal trigger. And he's like, nah, I don't do that. And then I'm like, okay, let's see. So we start talking about his game and how he pitches. And then sure enough, like check, did all of them. And it was like, dude, everybody does it, man. He's like, wow, okay. Now he uses that with his athletes as well. So
that's beautiful. Yeah. What's fascinating to me is that when you think about what people like you and I do, hopefully most of us will have something in our toolbox that's new and innovative. But for the most part, really what we do is we help athletes and coaches be more intentional about some things that they already do anyways, but just really haven't thought about as much.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Like, everybody has like certain gestures, cues, visualization, like everybody does it in some way, shape, or form. You're just not necessarily, very intentionally and very, very, like consistently at the right moment.
Mm-hmm. Or the one that I love talking about coaches with is bad body language. And then they talk about their athletes. They're like, oh, my athlete has such bad body language, blah, blah, blah. And then I show them a video of themselves at a game, and I'll be like, dude, your body.
Hey, I think your audio just got disconnected, man. I can't hear you.
Oh, I accidentally hit the mute.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, I have like this mute button on my headphones that I sometimes hit. But anyway, so I'll show the coach the video of them. Where did I get cut out?
It was just for like 5 seconds.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah, I'll show the coach the video of them having bad body language, and I'll be like, dude, your body language sucks just as much as your players does. Right. Like, I'm like, that's probably why their body language is so trash. And then we'll pick 3 positions that he can only go into. So he can only have his hands on his hips. This is one of the coaches I work with. He can only have his hands on his hips, hands behind his back, or in that like hands on his knees type of position. Otherwise, it's like nothing else is good. No arms crossed, no arm. This is a big one where the arm is crossed, but the hand is on the chin with coaches, especially basketball coaches. And the guy looks at you and you have this closed off body language, and they're like, oh, is this coach mad? instantly. And then it's kind of
Right.
funny, once I bring that up with the coaches, we'll go to a game and they'll look at the opposing coach and they'll be like, oh man, that's some bad body language right there. You
Right.
think that guy's happy with his team or no? So
Right.
it's just like breaking those habits and bringing awareness to them. So
Yeah. Yeah.
going back
Well,
though.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, like, obviously, that we do a lot of personality assessment, like sort of that's sort of what we do at the start of our process with our individual clients and then with teams too, sometimes just to see, what's important to an individual, what do they value? And sometimes we'll have athletes that really need acceptance, oftentimes from their coach, from their teammates as well, but acceptance from other people is something that really matters to them. So that's where I really tried to educate coaches about how they can tap into that, because I think coaches sometimes are just not aware of how much the little things matter. So a player that really craves that acceptance, when they come out of the game and coach doesn't even look them in the eye or give them a positive touch, like that shit matters, right? And it goes the other way as well. When coach does like that one little thing, it could completely change the player's outlook on that game and their performance when they re-enter.
Yeah, I know you guys do the Reese motivation profile.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any free ones that you know of that you like that people can give a go?
Yeah, it's a great question. Dave would be the guy to talk to. He's my director of analytics, as you know, so he'd be the go-to person for that. We've used the Reese pretty much exclusively here over the past couple of years, just because we found a lot of value in it. With free, yeah, I'm just not really sure. Like, I'm not sure I can give you like a great recommendation.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know of the only one that I've used that's free is at like viacharacter.org. And this isn't like a motivation profile per se where it asks you these questions, but it comes up with like your top 5 traits that you really exude or you already are embodying. So like when you take it, it'll say like your top 5 traits are like curiosity and like hard work, love, caring, like those types of things. So it like just gives you your core values basically. And when last time I took it, it was like spot on. And then you just think of like, again, going back to behaviors, you just think of different behaviors that you can do or the coach can do that can actually, get more of that into their life. Like if this is something that you're already like is already a part of your identity, then it's going to be very hard to change. So you might as well like do more of that stuff that makes you feel more alive. Makes you feel more accepted, like you were saying.
Right. Well, and I think with the testing, no matter what test it is, obviously you got to make sure it's a well-developed test. And it's also a test, in my opinion, that doesn't just put somebody in a box. I feel like that's somewhat dangerous sometimes in the athletic world and, outside of that too. But I think sometimes tests will put athletes too much in a box of like, hey, you're this. So what you're describing, I actually like, right? It just highlights your characteristics or values that most stand out, right? So you can tap into those, utilize those, right? And you can, in the team context, you can see how those complement what other people bring to the table. But it doesn't say, hey, you're this type, right?
Yeah, you're not an EFTJ.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge problem. I think oftentimes the typology stuff, it's appealing at first glance, but I think it's so extremely limiting sometimes that we, like as an athlete, you sort of don't see how much more you are than just that type. Plus, you and I might end up in the same type, and it doesn't capture our differences at all, which is kind of lame too, right?
Yeah, there was this one test that my mom took a while ago, not a long time, like 2 years ago. She's now retired, but when she took that test, it said that she didn't need as much sleep as everybody else. It was called like she was a dolphin or something like that. I think you could get classified as a dolphin, a bear, a wolf, and like one other one.
Uh-huh.
And she got classified as a dolphin. She's like, man, I knew I didn't need a lot of sleep. Like she's like, I rarely get more than 7 hours of sleep. You know, she was
Yeah.
everywhere between like 5 and 7 hours. But now that she's retired, she's like, I have the most energy the next day when I get 8 to 9 hours of sleep. You know,
Yeah,
that
that's
that
funny.
test told her that she didn't need as much sleep as everybody else, and she
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like bought into it instantly. And I'm like, okay, mom, you need to like get genetically tested to figure out if you even have
Right.
that gene that you can sleep less than 6. I'm like, that's a one in. I think you're more likely to get struck by lightning than you are to be somebody that has that gene where you can like literally live off of less than 6 hours of sleep a night.
Hmm.
And so but she didn't. She always thought like, well, I've always gotten this much sleep, you know. And it was
Right.
because she was so stressed out from work and, you know, anxious about the next day that she was having sleep problems more than it was that she's a
Yeah.
dolphin. So
Dolphin. That's
yeah,
hilarious.
but I agree. My other mentor, or Greg Warburton, he always says, you know, label jars, not people. And it's the same
Hmm.
thing when you're talking to a kid and you call a kid shy. And one strategy that he gives to coaches and parents when talking with athletes and kids is like, don't call it they are shy, say it like the shy, call it the shy, or call it the angry. Instead of like
Uh-huh.
you are angry, it's like, man, how are you going to deal with the angry today? Are you in control of the angry, or is the angry in control of you?
I
And
like
so
that.
now it's like
Yeah.
you're dissociating the person from that that label, really. Because,
Yeah.
you know, like we
Yeah.
aren't naturally shy people, or we aren't naturally angry people. It's just like when you associate those two things together, then that word, every time something happens, you get triggered to that word. So
Right. It reminds me of this book I read a while ago, and it's a great book, fascinating book. But like the most powerful thing that I took from it was on the cover page. It's just the title, and it's called "You Are Not Your Brain," and that concept, that idea, has actually been super useful to a number of athletes that I've worked with. You know, just that idea that just because, you know, sometimes your brain will tell you that you are certain things, oftentimes negative things, doesn't mean that you have to buy it, right? Like, your brain is not ultimately who you are. It's not your
mm,
identity unless you make it that. But you can disagree with your own brain. Like, your brain is more, it's a tool that you can use or that you can learn to use and, you know, to your benefit. But oftentimes it produces thoughts that are really not helpful, but we don't have to identify with those. So
hmm, I like that title. So you
it's
are
a good
not your
book too.
brain.
You are not your brain. It's a psychology book that essentially looks at you know, it looks at like neuropsychology. You know, so it has some pretty sciencey stuff in it, but it also has some really great step by step applied chapters that you know, that are a good read for anybody, really.
Hmm. Interesting. I mean that makes a lot of sense to me. I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast the other day, with Malcolm Gladwell, and Joe Rogan was talking about being able to read minds and how, you know, that technology is coming and whatnot. And then Malcolm Gladwell's like, man, I don't know if I would want to read somebody's mind. Like, there are so many thoughts going on in your head at one time. You know, if would you want to read all of mine? Because what if that thought pops across my head, like, man, Joe Rogan's an idiot, or I want to kill Joe Rogan. You know, it's not that I'm going to act on that thought
Right.
of killing, but like it might just pop up there for a second, you know.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
same thing with the athletes. Like they might have that thought that pops into their head. Well, I have a great example of this actually. So I've been working with a high school baseball player, and we talk about how he wants to, what he does pre-pitch, and what he does is he visualizes himself hitting the pitch that he wants and executing the plan that he wants, and backspinning the ball into the right center gap. And he was up at the plate. He's telling me the story. He was so excited about it because it is pretty cool. But he said he was up at the plate and he noticed that he had this thought of, don't roll it over to the shortstop, and he caught that thought, and he caught it, and then he said, you know what, like, that's not what I want to listen to. And then he went back to what he does want to do, which was, hit a line drive into the right center gap. And sure enough, he's like, and I smoked it right up the middle.
That's
and
awesome.
Moved over the runner, because I guess there was like one out late in the game and there was a guy on first, so he didn't want to roll it over to go into double play. But he was able to catch that thought, which he said was because of the meditation that he's been doing. So he was able to better catch those different thoughts in his head, and then he's not his brain. He could decide not to listen to that thought. So
I
like that
that's
one.
awesome. That's awesome. You know what I did? You might find this useful, especially with maybe some of your younger athletes. I actually went on Amazon before, and you can buy a little like rubber brains that with like a keychain on them. So I bought like a shit ton of those and just gave them to some of my clients. Just as a reminder that hey, like, you can talk to your brain, like it's separate from you in a way, right? And they actually seem to find a lot of value in that.
Oh, I like that one. I've actually been looking at, I'm big into those physical reminders as well. Like when you see, you look at your keys and you see that brain on there, you talk to that brain, and it sounds ridiculous, but it works. And there was another one. I just bought a bunch of little backpack keychains, because I talk about carrying like a mental weight. And when you're carrying a mental weight, it's like you're carrying around rocks in your backpack. So like I bought those little ones just to remind them of, like, hey, put down that weighted backpack, put down that mental weight, so
that's cool.
It's easier on you. And actually, with one of my teams, they just bought a weighted vest, and it's a bowling team. So this is going to be awesome at practice, no doubt about it. I can't wait to hear the results. But like, if the coach notices that the kid isn't moving on from like one frame to the next in bowling, they're in the 9th frame, but they're still thinking about that 10 pin they left standing in the 5th frame. The coach is just going to go over there and hand them the vest, and they got to put it on as a reminder that, like, hey, you're still carrying that past event with you right now, and it's hurting your game. It's throwing you off, and you might
I love that.
might not even realize it, but now they have a physical reminder actually on their body.
Right.
The same thing would go for basketball. I might bring that up to a couple of my basketball teams as well. Like, get a weighted vest. And like, when you see a kid just getting out of it, give them the vest and say, go ahead, go play. This is how you're playing anyways.
I love
put
that.
a 25-pound vest on and see how you can get after it.
That's really cool. Yeah, and I love like those physical cues and reminders. Another one that I actually just thought of that I haven't used it with a team, but I've always wanted to. So I was thinking, so if you had, let's say you have like 3 core values for a team, right? And you want your athletes to be thinking about those consistently throughout the game, reflecting, hey, like, what do I need? Where do I need to step it up? What if you had like water coolers, 3 water coolers, each of which is in a color that represents one of those core values. And then whenever there's a timeout, you drink from the cooler that you feel like you most need, where you like most need to step it up, basically.
I like that. Like Michael's secret stuff from Space Jam.
Yeah. It'd just be fun. Like, you could also track it. Like, it'd be interesting to even like track and just see like which cooler do the athletes most drink from, and like what are the patterns. I don't.
Those are good ideas. I love brainstorming sessions like this.
Yeah,
I'm always coming up with stuff. I know as a mental skills coach, you're always trying to. I don't know about you, but like with me, I'm always just giving my coaches ideas. And it's kind of like you kind of have to go into it with a mentality that like they probably won't even take any of your ideas, but like eventually they'll take one, and that one's going to help, so it's like you might hit them. I remember when I was out in Iceland working with that team, I must have hit him with like 100 different things, and we wound up using 2 or 3 of them. But like that doesn't, I don't care. It's just that like I'm trying to build awareness and build perspective, and hopefully something will latch on with him. And it's kind of funny when I bring up one and he's like, I just don't know, Pasic. Like that one's a little out there for me. Like that's I always laugh when I get that response. But that's kind of what it takes. Well, I know you gotta be somewhere, so yeah. But how I end these is, what's your number one takeaway from our discussion?
Number one, I just love the conversations, just learning, right? Like stealing a couple of your ideas, sharing a couple of mine. Like it's funny because I have like a million degrees, right? And so like you got to read lots of books and different things, but I just always feel like I learned so much more just in conversation with colleagues, man. And it's just fun. Like it's given me some good ideas for sure. So
lifelong learning, man.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you being on. I'll let you know when it comes out, but we'll talk.
Okay.
We'll talk soon for sure.
All right. Sounds great, man.
All right, man. See ya.
All right. See ya. Oh, hey, sure.
Unless
go on. Recording. Is this still part of the podcast?
No, I'll cut it out. What's up?
Okay.